Chuck, did you cut your hair too?
Okay, we're live.
Okay. And I just realized I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me, which is really stupid. So I'm looking for one and I'm not finding it quickly. So
I can email it to you right now, Cara.
that would be awesome because I'm being inept. Sorry. Thank you.
Email it to me too.
All right, a link is coming your way. Was that you, Ernie?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't remember seeing one either, Carly. Thank you.
It's on the public website, so I will send you a link as well.
There it is. There it is. Now I can't see anybody else, which is just fine. Okay, now I need to, sorry, minor tech. Oh, seriously? I'm just losing here. Sorry, hang on just a sec. There it is. Wow, it just vanished and came back. Okay. So we have, for first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I guess we are calling the meeting to order at 2:05. And we have minutes from February, March, and April. Do we have things that need to be revised in those minutes at all? If people had a chance to read those minutes.
I move we accept those minutes as they are.
Okay, we have a motion from Arnie to accept the minutes as written. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Jeremy. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All of us are saying aye. All right, we can move on from there. So we have board and staff reports. What you got, people?
Who wants to start?
A whole lot of rain this weekend, which was kind of fun. That's all I got. Anyone?
Well, yeah, let me report and Chuck chime in if you want. Last night's city council meeting, we finally adopted the culmination of several weeks of work and more from Chuck and Susie at Zion's Bank adopting water rates. And you guys may remember when Chuck was in front of us, the question was different permutations of the way rates were arranged to encourage conservation, for example, which was what our recommendation was. Last night it came down to two optional plans, so-called Plan C for Charlie, which had been around for a while, something like that. And Kalen had also drummed up another option E, which gave a little bit different advantages when it came to bonding, days cash in the bank and stuff like that. So it ended up being a split vote to adopt option C. Option E very narrowly failed, so we were kind of perplexed about what to do. So anyway, we did option C. Turned out to be the one that I analyzed as being one that did offer slightly lower water rates. By that I mean the base rate, I guess I should say, and slightly higher use rates. The idea being to encourage conservation by way of charging more for uses. So that's what we ended up doing. That's my report.
Yeah, and Chuck is here for an agenda item to discuss the details of those water rates that were passed all. So he has some detail for you that we'll see later on in the meeting.
Okay, I'm going to retire, so this is my last meeting. I wish you all well.
Really?
Sorry to see you go, Eric.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's well deserved.
Oh,
You've
well,
worked for a long time.
Well, Eric, if you're going to at least retire, this is your last meeting. I think you ought to aim your camera so I can see your face, because otherwise I can see the top of your head and I can say goodbye properly.
There we go.
That's better.
Can't see me
That's
anyway.
better.
There's too much light.
So Eric, are you going to be around or what's the deal? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll probably still be on the radio. I'll probably do more radio once this virus thing ends and I can start, getting close to people. I used to do a lot of public affairs, so I might be interviewing you as a KZMU host.
That would be fine. Thank you, Matt. Well, good luck to you. All the best. You know that you've been around with the city for a long time, as I understand it. So I will miss you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been interesting here with these meetings, so I got to know you all.
Can't hear you, Kyle. You need to unmute yourself. In the corner. Uh-oh. Oh, there he is.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. I was just thanking Eric for all these years of hard work and wishing him.
Thank you, Kyle. We've been through a lot together.
Yep.
We sure have.
Kyle and Eric, at the expense of taking just a few minutes here, what is the most memorable thing that you two jointly went through over the years? Kyle, you've been doing this a long time, as has Eric. What particularly sticks in your mind?
Rebecca Davidson.
Nothing sticks.
Doesn't stick in your crop, sticks in your mind.
I guess the longest thing was the sewer project and trying to get the sewer plant built. That was a long and hard job.
Yeah, that took a while, but we did do it.
We got it done.
Yep, it's the pride of the state.
Yeah, so Eric, on that subject, I was at a joint county city meeting a while back. Carly was there as well, at which Obi commented that sewer plant is seeing more water than they expected, and it's a bit of a downer because it means we have to build that expensive extra processing stage. It's money, blah blah blah, and so forth. So, any new news on that? They were Chuck and Obi said they were going to try to run down what's going on and understand better. Anything new on that?
Yeah, I can give you an update on that. And we said we needed 3 to 4 months to really do this. We're doing fine. We're not talking about any problem. And it looks like there's a 20% bust in the effluent meter. So, but we're not 100% sure we're there yet, Mike. So some of the readings that Obi was reporting, we think we're 20% high at this point.
Yes, so the meter might be faulty.
The meter might be faulty, yeah, and we're pretty sure that's the case. And then so we're gonna, make sure we're at 100% sure that's it, and then we'll come up with a mitigation measure. The preliminary findings, and again, it's just preliminary but we've had a couple of meetings on it. We're pretty sure that's what's going to be.
Yeah. If you
Which is-
recall
I'm sorry, go ahead.
at that meeting, Mike, we were still in the fact-finding phase because we're getting volumes that made no sense. And so we weren't concerned because we had to do more investigation. And it's quite possible this is just a faulty meter.
Okay, yeah, well, I understand that. I remember I was in the aerospace business all the time, and so metering is a big deal. So, well, that's good to hear. All right, I mean, that's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, more staff or board reports. Any?
Well, Chuck, did we lose some of your personnel?
Just lost Eric.
Other than Eric, did we lose your assistant engineer, other assistant engineers?
So Eric is retiring, and we're not going to fill that position. And DDAR is on maternity leave and on a voluntary furlough at this point. So it's right now it's me and Mark and Joel and Bosch after Eric retires. And I don't, DDAR may or may not come back. I just don't know. But as part of the budgeting, we were not going to fill Eric's position because he'd been trained in DDAR with all the expertise and information. She's really capable. So I think it was good. We'll miss Eric for sure, but I think if we can get DDAR back, which is still unknown, we'll be able to move forward and still provide the support we try to provide.
Sweet. Should I just tell them the 5 grants we got, Cara?
Sure.
So the UDWQ funded all 5 of our grants. They didn't fund them all fully. The one grant, which is a year out with 319 funding, is a dog waste initiative. It's going to go through the BLM. It's not for a lot of money. It's about $13,000. The second grant that's on the Pack Creek Restoration Project, that's also going through 319. So, and the NRCS has matching funds. Some of that project may get done in the next year, but we'll really be gung-ho with it a year from now was when the funding comes in. And that was fully funded at it was partially funded at $109,000, but we got NRCS covering the rest of it. So we'll be able to complete that project without any issues. The Southeastern Utah Health Department applied for another $14,000 to help digitize their on-site wastewater database. So all the septic systems will be quote online, and you can look them up on ArcInfo and deal with septic tank density. That was fully funded. They also asked for $200,000 to do a human waste initiative management, where they were going to do a 3-year project and try to encourage visitors and others using public lands to properly dispose of human waste. That was funded at 1/3, and they funded it for 1 year. Whether we go back and ask for more money or we get a different funding source, that'll be interesting to see. But it was funded for $75,000 instead of $200,000. And let's see, what was the third one, Cara? Oh, Pack Creek. No, excuse me, Mill Creek. Mill Creek received another $33,000 for funding phase 4 of the BLM's work up in Mill Creek Canyon, getting rid of Russian olives and doing some other restoration work up there.
And then you mentioned the Pack Creek one as well?
I did.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to figure out something on the computer at the same time as we're meeting.
Yeah, we got almost $200,000 or $300,000 worth of funding this year.
Yep, that's great. Okay, I think I just found what I needed to find. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to show a PowerPoint in a minute, and I shouldn't be moving so far ahead. Okay, any more board or staff reports?
I would add one more thing, Cara, if I may. I had gotten a letter from Dave Early. You guys all know Dave, Castle Valley, requesting a meeting to talk about his concerns about the upcoming groundwater management plan process. And I did meet with him over lunch. Jeff Adams came along. You guys all know Jeff. And the bottom line on what the action item that came out of the meeting was for me to look closely at San Juan County, Spanish Valley Special Service District. Their monitoring plan for their well number 1. And so Jeff did forward me that report. I had seen the graphs before, but not the report. And he sent me a bunch of other documents, which I have not had time to look at. But it was interesting reading the monitoring report. I thought it was very sparse and left out a world of things that would give me confidence that it really did accurately measure the lack of or presence of well drawdown in other areas around that area. So anyway, that's I'm still digesting all that. Jeff and Dave suggested that we develop a better relationship with Mark Stilson in particular, because he thinks that the more we get to know these folks, the better position we will be in come groundwater management plan time, because it just takes time to build relationships and trust with people. And I think that's a great idea.
So,
That's all I got. That's all I got. Thank you.
so in that regard, is there, and Carly might know more about this, and Chuck, has there been any efforts to move towards some sort of regional development, group where all these municipalities and agencies are represented, GWSSA, San Juan County, and their sewer and water district, and then the city, of course, because it seems that we've got a regional, common bunch of issues that would serve us well if we could at least talk every so often.
So yeah, Eric, we have formed that little committee per the ILA that we signed with those folks when the sewer treatment plant was built. And that's the meeting that Mike was referring to, where we identified potentially that sewer issue or the wastewater facility issue. So we're going to plan to meet quarterly, and it's going to be information sharing amongst staff primarily through the different agencies. So we finally got that up and running after several years.
That's great, because the old administration in San Juan County was not terribly interested in regulation and cooperation.
Okay.
So on that, I'll just chime in on that note too, Mike. On the last at the last MOP meeting, we had a fairly big discussion on groundwater and the resource there in terms of Section 4 and Section 5 and what it means to the partnership. And I've been asked, and it looks like we will be having our next MOP meeting at the Spanish Valley, the Trail Arena out there. And Mark will probably present the second hour and a half will be spent, or the second hour anyways, will be spent on a groundwater monitoring plan.
Awesome. What's the date on that, Arnie? I think I missed the last one, to my regret.
July 15th.
Okay. Is there a time and assigned?
The MOP is scheduled from 1 to 3, and then Mark's presentation will be from 3 to 4.
Okay.
I will try, since everybody at the MOP, that's kind of why we're extending it, because Mark does like to use the MOP as a venue, because everybody's there, and it's an open forum for this kind of stuff. I will probably try to make the July meeting just an hour and a half long, so the actual Mark's meeting will actually be 3:30 to 4:30, so that people don't have to sit there with a 3-hour meeting. Excuse me, yeah, 2:30 to 3:30, as opposed to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 hours is a long time to be in a meeting car.
Yeah.
So forgive me.
I'd like to admit.
Yeah.
Arnie, is there an office, or are you going to be in the arena?
We're probably going to be in the arena. There is a conference room there, but if we have 25 people, we won't be able to sit 6 feet apart. And we generally have 25 people at the MOP meetings.
Right. That's why I was
So why that was chosen.
open air with a shade, right? I've never been in there. I was just curious.
It's an interior enclosed arena, but it's big. So that way it's very easy to have lots of space between everybody. So
Okay,
it's kind of a similar scale to Star Hall, but there's like bleachers on the side, so it's easier just to keep people separated out. You won't be as comfortable. You know, if you've got like a stadium seat, you might want to bring it.
You know, Star Hall might be another idea for a venue. Now that you brought it up, that might even be a better idea for a venue.
That might be more comfortable for a 3-hour meeting.
For a 3-hour meeting. Let me see what I'll talk to them too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on board and staff reports? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the discussion of in-person versus virtual meetings. I think when I talked to Carly last week preparing for this meeting, City Council is going to start meeting soon in person. I would like to just have a quick discussion with all of us about what we want to be doing. I personally have a person who I assist who has Parkinson's and is in a pretty high risk category. So I'm not terribly comfortable yet being in tight quarters with folks. I don't know what other people's thoughts are. And I also just wanted to put out there, I think it's really hard to run a meeting with both Zoom or both virtual and people in person. We just did one for Grand Conservation District yesterday and it was pretty horrid. So I don't know what other people think and what we want to do moving forward, but I thought we should talk as a group about that for a moment.
Yes, and sorry, can I cut in real quick, Cara? I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I gave you bad advice last time we spoke. So right now, we're operating under, the governor issued an emergency order allowing us to basically meet via Zoom, that no anchor location is required.
Okay.
Once his executive order goes away, and who knows when that will happen, it might not be this year. You know, he might keep it in place for, he hasn't let us know. We will need to have an anchor location and a quorum present at the anchor location. So I gave you poor advice because I was like, I think we can keep on with Zoom. So I just wanted, before that you opened up, just be aware of that constraints. And of course, speak freely amongst yourselves, and then we have some ideas too that we can throw out, but just wanted to correct my mistake earlier.
No, you're fine, that's good. And so that emergency order is still in effect as of now? Do you, is there an anticipated expiry date?
I've not heard of one. I'm sure it won't be until, at least until yellow is done, you know. And I hate to speculate because it can go so many different ways, but no talk of it changing.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know what other people's thoughts are on that, but I figured we should just chat about it briefly if anyone has thoughts. And otherwise, Carly can give us options.
I'm in no hurry to be in a boardroom.
Yeah.
I'm likely working from home for the rest of the year, with the exception of when I'm in the field with people. And so I think the best thing that most of us can do at this point is stay out of closed air spaces.
And you've got a great new home to be in. It looks
Yeah,
lovely.
with lots of big windows. So yeah. So I would consider just continuing to move forward in this way if we felt it was productive enough.
And as long as we legally can.
As long as we, well, even still, well, no, of course.
My personal opinion, for what it's worth, well, let me pass this on. Kaylin, when the same subject came out at last night's board meeting, Kaylin, for example, said, you know, I'm not really comfortable either, if I understood him correctly. And I suspect he's not the only one who feels that way. I'm an older man, you know, and supposedly at higher risk. And I don't really know quite what to think about it. So all these yellow, green, purple decisions are political decisions, not health decisions.
Right.
So it's kind of up to us. I don't know how we're going to work it, but hopefully we can come to something that a compromise that works for everybody.
Kyle or Arnie? Or Denver? Denver's back.
Trying to get Denver back in the meeting. He's been hanging out in the waiting room and technological difficulties.
Okay, so Denver's back. Can you hear us, Denver?
Yeah, my computer drops the internet about this time every afternoon.
Oh, fun. Sorry. So we were just talking about in-person versus virtual meetings, and that for the moment we are still able to have virtual meetings, though when the governor's emergency order is rescinded or expires, that may well change. I don't know if it sounds like city council's not yet going to have in-person meetings, but I just figured we should have a short discussion about people's thoughts about in-person versus virtual meetings. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, Denver.
I think I would be able to attend a virtual meeting if we did reasonable things, wore masks and, you know, kept the distance and all that. These are okay, but it certainly misses something when we're not all in the same room together.
Well, and we had our first in-person meeting with the Grand Conservation District yesterday, and it was split between Zoom and in-person, and it was awkward. And it started out with masks on, and you can't hear each other. You can't understand each other with the masks on. There's trade-offs. So I think we just need to kind of figure out how we move forward. But I don't know, Kyle or Arnie, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'd agree with Denver. There is something missing that we're not face-to-face in the same room. On the same token, I agree with Jeremy. And Mike and Kaylin, I'm not a young man anymore. And I've just been through 3 operations in the last 3 months.
You had a
Last one was last Friday. And sure, I'm up and around, but I don't need to get sick at this point in time. No. So for now, this works for me. I can attend. I can be part of the group and everything else. If we were to have in-person meeting, I would show up.
Are you bionic now?
I've been bionic for a little while. They just had to replace some of the parts.
Ah, got it.
And I'm okay, whatever. So.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like there's no big rush, like this isn't coming as an immediate decision. Is the council going to be having in-person meetings soon or no?
So definitely when the governor's order is either expires or ends, and we are exploring some ways to try to make it as safe as possible when they do have to have a quorum present. And you're right, it gets dysfunctional when it's part Zoom, part quorum. So we're exploring ways to make that a little better. One, I'm a little less worried about water board meetings because they're not heavily attended.
Right.
The council meetings are harder because sometimes we have 50, 60 people in there, and it's just, so I think there are conceivable ways for this body to meet a little more safely with social distancing. There's ample room for us to do so. And of course, whatever, if we end up putting like plexiglass between the council members on the dais, you too will be able to enjoy that with it. So we're, hopefully whatever we figure out with council, we'll find a way to do it, translate it to your meetings too. I just want to be sensitive to high risk populations, but again, I think it's less of a concern than those crowded council meetings. It might be easier for us to keep it safe.
So the plexiglass thing, that's what Jerry used to do with the drummer dude. Remember Jerry Garcia? He had a plexiglass between him and all the time. Didn't want the germs. Have you considered also taking people's temperature as they walk in the door?
Yeah, you know, we have thermometers here. We're taking employees' temperature each morning. So we could certainly definitely do it for board members. I don't know about the general public because I mean, I'll have to look at the order to see what that's like. Some people might be resistant to that. But yeah, we can certainly guarantee that the employees and even the board members don't have a fever.
And then you get the other option would be if they do have a fever, you tell them you can't come in.
I mean, that is what we tell the employees. They have to go home.
They have to go home, and that's what they do at all the hospitals around here too, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You don't want to without a mask either.
Yeah, we can do that. So it's easier to control the board. It's the general public that makes it a little more difficult to manage. But
you guys struggled with some of that last night too, didn't you? There was talk about that being a discussion item about enforcing a mask rule.
For our city council?
Or for the city?
For the
we didn't talk about it last night that I remember, Carly. Do you?
I thought the mayor mentioned it at the beginning.
We can't, you're correct that we can't enforce a mask rule for the general public as the city. The governor's order supersedes ours and we can't be more restrictive than he is. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Okay. So for our next meeting in July, as of now, we'll probably be doing it this way, I would imagine, unless anyone strongly disagrees. So we'll move on to the update on overnight accommodations progress, which I think is probably you, Carly.
That is me. This is a short update. So we just know that we haven't met with you since, I believe, April, and we know that we were talking about overnight accommodations and water conservation and water resource management principles associated with that. And we wanted to let you know that we haven't lost that thread. There just has been no development since we last met. So we'll keep you informed and updated and bring you into the conversation depending on how the discussion unfolds. But for now, that's been on the back burner for the city council.
Okay, any questions for Carly on that topic? Seeing none, we'll go on to Chuck and the water rates update with what happened at council last night and whatever else you want to let us know, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you, Cara. Yeah, I got it. I think what I'll do is start with where I last talked to the board, and I'll try and keep this brief, but I want to share my screen here in a minute. So if you will recall, this was the project list that was developed as part of the Water Distribution Master Plan. It was a total of $15 million worth of projects. And when we got your input, we were talking about trying to fund all of that $15 million worth of projects. And we called those alternatives 1 through 5. Went to council, we had a workshop and a council meeting. And it was clear that the options 1 through 5 were just too much of an increase in rates given the times that we're in now. So Levi and I went back and we spent some time and reprioritized what we felt we really just had to have to make our system, to upgrade our system, to make our system secure and optimize our system. And then we came up with this reprioritized list here on this far right column, which you see was about 55% of the dollar value of the 15 million, so 7,578,000. And you can see in there we left a new well, a new storage tank. Even though this is a 50% of the cost of the storage tank, I believe we can get the other 50% in communications from the Drinking Water Board. We'll see, but I think there's a solid chance. This is the Mill Creek Drive project, which we have is fully designed, and it needs to be replaced. It's an old failing part of the system. We need that for distribution upgrade. Then these other projects are basically to help with fire flows. And then down here, this was a key that I put in there with Levi. We need to optimize and secure our existing facilities. You know, by optimize, we need an interconnect with GWISA. There used to be one, there's not one there now. It broke and no one fixed it. It's not a big thing, but it might be a $75,000 thing. And, you know, we didn't have that kind of money in the budget. We need well houses that need to be upgraded and secure, and I won't go into it, but, you know, we have a great system. The water department does a great job. Don't get me wrong. It's just that now is the time to do this. So with that as the basis, we developed what we called, let me change screens here. Options A through C. Went back to council, and council said, well, we kind of like C because it's we can maybe live with that. But then Kaylin had an idea that we could develop an option E, which would essentially, and I'm paraphrasing this, increase the base rate. So you see here under option C, we're currently at $10 for a base rate. Next year, they'll be increased by $3. And then 5% per year thereafter. And option E was going to increase the base rate to $13.50 next year, and then I think it was $17 the following year. The reason being base rates are more stable than usage rates, and we've increased the usage rate pretty high. I'll show you those in a minute. So if they become a conservation measure in 3 or 4 years, you know, it may be prudent to go back and raise the base rates more than a 5%. It just, we don't know that far out in advance, but this can work. And what this also includes, so you see, one thing we did is we upgraded the residents in the city, and I took this from your input as a board. The first 3,000 gallons are still free. It was up before, there was at a 2,000 gallons free, and then we started paying at the next setting was 60 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's not a big savings, but it's some for people who are frugal or who are at the lower end of the economic scale and don't have a, you know, and conserve water. This is a bit of a reward. And then you see that the usage rates increase, except for commercial. We, instead of raising it 30%, option C, the yellow means that this doesn't follow the percentages, okay? So in the header above. So this went up 50%, 50% for commercial in and out of the city. Down here, these are like 70%, I believe, increases. So, and these are the people who use more water. And that, you know, and we've discussed this before, but for those watching, if larger users require us to have a larger system. So it seems fair to charge them more because they have greater requirements in our system, if that comes across. It also included, see if we copied that here. No. As part of this, we'll be doing a bond for $6 million in this coming year, and one in 2022 for about $2.5 million, so that we can get these projects that I showed you going, as opposed to having to wait and collect. We couldn't put in the well, the storage tank, and that Mill Creek project for probably 4 years if we had to wait and collect revenue and set it aside. So what a lot of the money will be used for is debt service to fund these projects that are these needed projects. And one other thing I wanted to show you that I don't know if you've seen these before. I don't think you have. Clint Yark, who is our new finance director and a very, in my opinion, very capable finance director, put together this spreadsheet which I modified. And so the council asked, well, what's the impact? So in the residential, if a person used 3,000 gallons per month, currently you would pay $10.75. So I was wrong, it's 75 cents per thousand for the first one. Under option C, you go from $10.75 to $13. And option E would have been $13.50. So if you use 25,000 gallons under the new scenario, currently you're paying $31, your bill would go up to $43. And if you're currently using 75,000 gallons, you're paying $84.75 and your bill would go up to $124.11. And then on commercial side, for currently, if you're using 3,000, which would be, I don't know, maybe a small business, maybe an office type environment, it could be as cheap as $26 a month for currently, and it would go up under option C to $39 a month, essentially a 50% increase because of the usage rates, I think. And currently 65 goes up to 104. And if you're a large user, 75,000, you go from 178 to 295. We have other users, of course, who use 140,000 gallons a month. We think that those are two of the hotels that are in that range. So the theory there is that those costs get passed on. They're the largest users. And of course, our system has to be large, like I talked before. And then if I may, I'm done with this. I just want to show you one more, then I'd be happy to answer any questions. I want to go to, it'll take me a second here. I think you'll find it interesting. Oops, the agenda and the summary. No, it's not that one. Sorry, I thought I had this. Oh, I know it. I'll do it this way. Council. Here we go. Can you see that new table, or do I need to have it on the screen?
You unshared the screen, I think. I can't see it.
Okay, thank you. Now can you see it? Yeah. This was a comparison of residential water rates for 15 similar Utah cities. I think I earlier showed you one that had 30 cities that weren't necessarily the same population range as us. These cities now go from, 8,200, here's the population on this side, down to Nephi. Well, here's Sunset City with 5,200, and we're at 5,200, almost exact same size as we are. Sunset City charges as their base rate $19.75. So Moab, going into last night, literally had the lowest rates in the state for residential base rates, statewide average being $28. WISA charges $21.75. So while I know increasing rates was a difficult decision for council to make in these times, but it's, I guess my point just being, it's still a good value compared to other places in the state of Utah where you could live, especially given the quality of our good water here. So that's all. That was my update, Cara. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Okay. Yeah. And so it looks like even with the increase in the base rate to $13, we're still one of the lowest in the state for a city our size.
Absolutely.
Okay. So any questions for Chuck at this point?
Yeah, I got several, Chuck. I guess you knew that was coming, huh? Could you pull up the first screen that you have in terms of your projects?
Sure. Give me a second. PowerPoint. Screen 2. That's showing, Marnie?
That's showing. So you've got one of the new wells on at the very top there, and then you had another new well at the bottom, and line number, what it used to be ID, and now it's not applicable. So we're still going to drill one well, right?
Yes.
Yes, and that will keep us in good shape. If one of the wells goes down, we'll have a backup.
That's right. That's the plan. We need some redundancy. We've got 2 wells now and 4 springs, and I have concerns that if the springs become less reliable in the future, that we need the ability to go deeper into the ground and use a well. So,
as well. Yeah, and the wells that we currently have are not functional. Even though we've got 6 or 7 of them, they're not functional at this point in time.
That's some of them. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And then you talked about the line connection to Gwissa. That was recommended several times by several people, including in a MOP meeting, and we discussed it there. I'm really happy to see that happening. That could save us both a lot of effort, and if we can sell Gwissa leftover extra spring money in the winter time when we're not pumping and they can avoid pumping, we can actually save some of that good Glen Canyon aquifer water.
That's right. And, and I speak as if it's a done deal. It's not a done deal in that Dana and I have agreed that this is what we as staff will recommend, but I'm going to, I'll be going back to council and she'll be going to her board and saying, this is what we recommend. Are you all good with it? So, I mean, it's not, council hasn't approved that one yet, but it's something that we as staff are going to go to council and recommend.
If I need to go talk, I will. Then if you want to.
Sorry, just a second, Arnie. Would it be helpful, Chuck, to have anything from this group, as far as a recommendation to council to that effect?
Not yet. It's not, because this is so new. I may come back to you and ask you for something. We need to find out about bonding timing, and I need to really put together a prioritized list with timing on this now, next step. So there may be a point where I come back and say, here's what Levi and I think, and we'd like your guys' input on it, and then at that point, that would probably good. Then we'll go to council with that more detailed plan than this. This is a good basic plan, but I need to take it into a program management stage now. Sorry,
okay, the other thing we've discussed several times in terms of monitoring is that not everybody's clear on whether or not the springs are being monitored 24/7 that you're actually getting water from. And I'm not talking about the water that you're actually putting into our pipes, what's coming out of the springs 24/7. And then there was discussion on perhaps putting some monitoring in on the far northwest end of the valley there, because that would be the bottom end of where the Glen Canyon Aquifer shows up. And the city does have rights to a spring there. But as far as I know, neither of the springs that I'm talking about have a total flow measurement on what's coming out of the springs, not just what you're using.
I believe you're correct in that. And one of the things that I'd say is we're in the final draft review almost of phase 3 of Ken Combs' work. And what he has included is a monitoring plan. The scope of work was to evaluate the spring and well protection zones, but we also got him to put together a monitoring plan that we'll be looking at that. I hear what you're saying, that would be a good thing to monitor if we can work that into the system. So and I wouldn't argue with you. I think that's interesting idea.
None of those items are on your proposed water project list at all.
Well, you see down there, we're optimize and secure existing facilities.
Yep.
That's all of that, isn't it?
Some of those are included in that.
Okay, so Chuck, if I would have figured out a way to get a grant to get you the devices to measure those springs, and all I needed was the support of the city to maintain those monitoring instruments and read them, is that something you think the city could do?
I do. I think Levi would be fully in support of that, and I would be certainly, and I suspect council would be too. It wouldn't be an increase in manpower. You know, I don't know if the board knows it, but we have an employee go to every one of our wells and springs every day and make sure that they're operating and takes measurements. So they go there already every day. So the maintenance in those I don't think would be significant, but they could certainly take another measurement. So yeah, I think we'd be interested. Yes.
Okay. Could you show your rate schedule that you're going with now? The second one, the C and the E, whatever it was.
Yeah. Give me a second. Is that can you see it?
Yeah, I'm pleased you're leaving the residential and the the residential out of city base rate at a lower rate. I've said that before.
Here.
Yeah, I'm also pretty happy that when we're talking lots of water, that you've actually got some real rates in there before. I was looking at one point in time and I was thinking at plus 60,000 gallons. If you're out of the city though, you're getting to be $5 a gallon now. I mean, yeah. and that's all of a sudden, yeah. And you are a demand on the city because we do have to have bigger infrastructure for it and so on and so forth. And that's why we charge truckers more taxes than you pay for your car because they're harder on the roads. And so this totally makes sense to me. And I'm glad to see it approaching $5 for a commercial outside of the city, if not more, a gallon. I agree completely with that. And I think you can make up the funding that way too. This is set in stone at this point in time. So I'm glad that it came out the way it did. I think that's great.
So wait, is it $5 a gallon or is it $5? Huh?
It's $4.68 per 1,000 gallons.
Per 1,000 gallons. That's a big
1,000 gallons. Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute.
1,000 gallons, which is still a screaming deal.
Yeah, exactly. $5 a gallon, not so much.
Yeah, my old hydraulics professor at University of Arizona used to always say, well, we're not going to appreciate water until it costs more than gasoline. So $5 a gallon might get us there, huh? Sorry.
Okay, well, I'm glad to see that those higher uses are much higher in cost. Then the other thing I was just going to mention on your Moab water rates when your projects, most of those projects they're being driven by the issue with enough pressure in our fire hydrants that we currently may or may not have and we need to maintain. Most of these projects that you have in there right now are something we have to do.
That's right. But like, for instance, upgrading to these 8-inch pipes, that will help fire flows in these particular cases. Because right now, in some places we have 4-inch lines, 8-inch lines going to 4-inch lines, and we can't get the same flow through there. So that's what a lot of these projects that survived are to upgrade up to 8-inch pipe. Yeah, there are other projects that could be done, but this was, we thought, a good start, and I'm very happy that council approved it myself, because it lets us.
I don't have any more comments. Thank you, Chuck.
Yep.
Anybody else have comments or questions for Chuck? Doesn't look like it. Okay, looks like everybody's good. Chuck, thank you so much for putting in the time and helping us see what came of things, and also with the somewhat late getting with us. I think hopefully it was helpful having the water board involved in some of the discussions, at least at the end.
Sure. Yeah, sure it was. It was, we never say we have all the ideas. So we took some of your ideas, took council's ideas, put it in with what the numbers would let us do, and came up with something that I think is better.
Good.
So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So that being the end of item number 6, we'll shift to the last item for the day, which we now have for the next hour and a bit. And I will see if I can make this work correctly. And what we're just going to be doing is going through, we looked at this PowerPoint, I think it was back in April when we last met. And what I wanted to do is go through it a little more slowly and really answer some of the questions that are on some of these slides about what's missing, what's redundant, what do we really need to focus on with changes. So, assuming I know how to do this, I have no idea what you guys can or cannot see. Can you see that at all?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, and I figured out how so when I'm looking over here to the side, it's because I'm looking at all of you so I can see who has questions or what's going on here. And we can, bounce around on this to a degree. Oh, everybody vanished. Oh, wait, there you are. Okay, I can see. It's not quite what I wanted, but that'll work. So I think I'm going to leave it the other, well, yeah, I'm going to leave it this other way. Sorry. Is that going to let me do it or no? Okay, whatever. So still figuring this Zoom thing out. So as far as this table of contents, I mean, I kind of see the table of contents as being a bit of a, like an outline. Are there things on here that you guys see that are missing, or things that are unnecessarily repetitive, or things that you just really hate about the current plan that you feel like really should be our first priority? If you'll recall, on our next slide, there's a number of these that are things that are really what city staff will be working on to a large degree and bringing back to us in report form, whereas others down here are more the things that, these things down here are more the things that we'll probably be talking about. But what are your thoughts as far as things that are, what did I do? That are, as far as what's missing, what's unnecessary or repetitive, or what do you really think we need to work on? And I'm going to shut up and let you guys talk, and I'm going to take notes.
Well, Cara, may I ask a couple of real basic questions? I know this is a document required by the state Division of Water Quality. Is that correct? And there's and tell me, refresh me again, when's this document, this update due?
So it's the Division of Water Resources, I believe.
Okay.
And it is due not this year, it is due the next year, like next August or so. Because we got an extra year because they had to start staggering reports. They were getting so many conservation plans, like too many of us were on the same track, the same 5-year track. And so they've given the option. It could be due this year. We could do that, but they've given us a year extension if we wish to exercise it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So So my next question is, besides the obvious destination, the Water Resources Department, and as presumably they have to bless it, do they have certain criteria about certain subjects have to be listed and discussed? In other words, who is the audience? Just them, or do you anticipate other local people, other local entities to use this plan?
It would seem like really for this plan to be functional and worth our time, it needs to be for Moab. And so sure, there's requirements to meet state requirements. There's things we need to do for the state Department of Water Resources, but honestly, if we're just doing it as an exercise to meet those requirements, I don't see we should spend a lot of time on it. If we actually use it to create a plan that works for the city of Moab and makes it good for us, then I think it's worth putting the time into. And that's what I thought we were headed to, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're both right. You're definitely both right. So this has certain, I don't know, I think there's statutory requirements or at least regulatory requirements that we do have to meet. And I can pull up like a list of those things. They are incidentally covered in so much of our existing plans. They will require updating. But of course, Cara is completely right, which is this shouldn't just be a rote exercise that we just sort of plug in some information and get the sign off from the state. It's got to be something programmatic and that can produce conservation results in this community. So we should be doing it with an eye towards programs and measures and practices that will be effective here. So if you want to see that list, I think Cara does have it in her slide too. I can't remember which PowerPoint I'm remembering.
Yeah, I do. And if we go through this, that's why I kind of wanted to just start. And I'm sorry, I got out of the other because it was messing with me. Mm-hmm. If we just use this as an outline, if there's, a lot of this needs to be in here, but I think the biggest things that I'm most interested in are what's missing and what's unnecessary. Whether it's statutorily unnecessary or if we have to have it because it's a requirement, okay, fine, we have to have it. But are there things that we have in here that we just are like, why is this here and we don't need it? Because I think that tells us what we really should put some time into. And maybe those questions will become easier to answer as we move through the rest of this. But yeah. So I believe we have to have things like our water rights and source capacity, a lot of these things that are what the city will be doing, which are these items here in blue. Those have to be in there, if I recall correctly. And then these do too, but these have more of a give and take in what we want them to be, as opposed to being something that is set by a requirement from the state.
Are the title, page 24, water conservation goals in your index? Should that thing, because it's capitalized, does that make it a major heading? Should it be titled farther to the left to set off the subtopics?
All I did was I took a screenshot of the table of contents of the existing plan, so I can't change that. So yes, I would assume that that's basically like the next section. And so that is the section that is now in orange here. That's the stuff that I think is really what we are talking about, because most of these things in blue are really, there's some things we might have some input into or some ideas about, and we want to know these things to better deal with creating conservation goals and conservation plans. But some of these are just, Levi knows them, or they're, or they're in Chuck's head or whatever. They're not things that we really can change that much. Or like the distribution system, we just looked at those tables of all the things we need to improve in that. So yeah, I think this is really the area that is the core of what we should be working on, unless you guys disagree. So any thoughts? Can't hear you, Arnie. Can't hear you, Arnie.
Now you can.
There you go.
I don't disagree with you that most of this stuff that's in the first part is generally stats from the city. Then they're the ones that know this stuff. We did have a discussion about whether or not demand projections to build out was the proper category, or whether or not it should be in the next 50 years.
Right.
and based upon not necessarily what lot sizes are, but based upon what the governor's saying our growth rate's going to be. The other, there was another one in it we also discussed too at some point in time. Water use trends and current use and per capita consumption. The current document, if I remember correctly, was rather confusing on who was actually using what. And I'm hoping that that becomes a much clearer picture by the time 2021 comes around. I don't know if we can write the water conservation goals unless I know who's using the majority of the water and where we could cut water.
So it sounds like that's something that is a high priority for city staff to help us make sure we know before we move forward on other things.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely that one. And then, like I said, the demand projection to build out, we struggled with that a little bit at one point in time. And we don't necessarily believe build out would be what we should projecting forth.
So what kind of demand projections do you feel? Because it sounds like that's another important one to be understanding. We're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, where are we going? Do we need enough water, you know, for till 2050, or do we need water to 2100? And there's the only other thing I've got in here in terms of environmental concerns that I'm thinking of off the top of my head here at this point in time is that with the discussions we had with the Western Water Resources people out of Boulder and NOAA, that even though we're going to see the same amount of water, we're going to have 17% less water in our system.
Right.
From 2050, and that needs to somehow be included. Those environmental concerns, although exact numbers aren't out there, we will not have as much water because of climate change as we currently have now.
So it sounds like if we're prioritizing or asking the city staff to prioritize the information that'll help us the most, getting a really good handle on water use trends, current use, and per capita consumption by residential versus commercial, hotel versus industrial, that kind of thing is really important. That we need to determine what metric or demand projections are we measuring to. And then the last one is making sure in all of this that we're keeping in mind climate change and that that's going to reduce water availability. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's what you're hearing me say. I'm assuming somebody else might want to say something else. I'm going to be quiet now.
Okay. And and just so you guys know, I'm going to make sure I repeat this stuff back because I'm writing it down so that I actually can remember it later. And I want to make sure I get it right. So thank you for bearing with me on that.
So I wanted to say something about what Arnie touched on there with build out. It's kind of a real nebulous term because the council can always decide that we can build higher instead of out. So there isn't any real definition or something that you can hold to. What I would suggest is that we kind of harmonize the conservation plan with the water budget that Ken Colm was working on and just stick to a certain number in the future, like 40 years, I think is what we used for a projection as far as water demand. And, you know, that at least is consistent and reasonable, let's say, as opposed to something, you know, that we can't really foresee.
It's also worth remembering that the state has set goals for this region that we need to meet by 2030, I believe, which is a 25% reduction of, I believe it's 2011 use. So the goal the minimum goal has been set. And we need to know the water use profiles in order to understand what the goal looks like at the end of the day, right? Per capita, and I think there are a lot of ways to talk. I think it's per capita use, 25% reduction, but I can't recall off the top of my head. So of course we can have a more aggressive conservation goal. It can be 30%, 35, or different goals on top of that that are specific to commercial, residential, also the water resource management goals that are independent of sort of strict conservation. But I just thought I'd throw that out there just to around your head a bit, that at least we have that framework to start with.
I'm chiming back in, Carly. We had a discussion a little bit with Water Resources and sent them a relatively not nasty letter that given the fact there's only 5,000 people here, we have 3,000 people here over the weekend, that per capita consumption doesn't make much sense to us. So what they did do was check it down into sections of the state, and we're lumped with Price and basically our Southeastern Utah Health Department, Emory and Carbon County at this point in time. I don't think we're lumped in. They told us we needed to cut 17% was what they asked for by 2030. And that 17% just happens to be how much we're expected to lose due to climate change. But you're right, we could do more. We could be more drastic and be more encouraging if we wanted to. The other thing I would like to note is that if we look at when we first started doing this, when Huntsman was in office in, was it the late 90s or 2002, we've already cut Moab City and Spanish Valley area has already cut their water usage by almost 15 to 20%. If I can't remember the exact statistics, but we looked at it at one point in time, we've already really cut back a lot per capita wise. It was going to be tough to make the 17% based on what we have to deal with. And like I said, we've already done a good job as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward to going that direction in the future. I did think it was 17% that they wanted from Grand County.
So I think a way to move forward so we can hear from everybody and also get through a little bit more of the meat of this is, I think, coming up with a list, and I think getting from Carly and Levi perhaps what's realistic on a timeline of, all right, if we want to make sure we have a better understanding of what current water use trends and demand projections, and then what are we shooting for, basically creating our goal here of conservation, what's realistic from the city's perspective, especially with the current climate of things. Is that something we could expect to have by fall, by September, by December? Like, what's your estimate on that? And then I want to open it back up to everybody else if you've got other stuff on this topic before we move on.
So I want to hear, especially, well, Levi and Chuck will know better, and so I hope they fill in what I have to say. For the water use profiles, that's actually information that our treasurer's office and like our finance department has, because we track water sales. And that's how we'll identify that kind of information just about use here in the city. And I know Rachel Stenta had been tracking that to some degree because I saw a lot of graphs and information from her. We have a new finance director, so it might take us a little bit to sort of get our ducks in a row and find out where Rachel had left off and where he's picking up. That is probably, depending on how sophisticated you want it to be, that's the big question. I mean, we can turn something around in like a month, get some general ideas about use. And I know that I feel like we did part of that work for the rate study, but I don't want to speak for Chuck too much. And then when it comes to like source protection or source reliability or demand projections, I think Chuck and Levi probably have a better idea of what that data looks like. So I'll turn the time over to them.
So as far as actually coming to some kind of, reasonable projection as far as the conservation plan in accordance with what Arnie was talking about, the already declining use of water, and then Carly talking about what the state is asking for. And then we have the climate change, depreciation in the amount of water. All of that can be, graphed and put into mathematical functions fairly easily. And so what I would suggest is that when we start collecting this data and getting a handle on it, that someone from the board or maybe just Carly can go up and talk to Mark Jollison about how to, visualize this, how to put it into a form that we can put in a report. and he's very good with Excel and just, math, calculus, the works. So that's how I would suggest this be accomplished.
And I think one thing I could see, just knowing how this group has functioned in the past, I would say bringing things to us in a draft format where you're fairly, like, you have a confidence level in the accuracy, but you maybe want us to see it so we can respond to, wait, what are our 14 questions about it before you get too far into it, I think could be super helpful. So that then we're not having a situation of you guys have put all this time into it and it comes to us and we're like, wait, what about this? And you're like, oh, we have to start over.
Yeah,
So
we could do for the next meeting, even is just sort of have like a kind of a scope generally of what we have in mind and kind of before we dive too far into it.
Yeah.
For both the trends for projections, demand projections, and whatever kind of Ken Colm is doing too to, determine our water budget. And just a kind of a rough outline and have some engineers talk about the different options and then go from there.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah. So, Cara, may I ask? So, forgive me. I'm used to working in smaller groups rather than committees. I'm worried about whose responsibility is it? Who's going to champion the production of this document? I know it's more than a year away, and that gives us lots of time. But what it scares me here is that we're going to flail around like a committee, and everybody's going to submit all this and this, and nothing's going to get written. So, who's going to write it and who's going to review it? I want to know.
So that's what I'm hoping to get to by the end of the meeting. I think that there's pieces of it that need, and this is where I think coming up with a sense of what are the thing, like if it's staff stuff, like I envision the stuff that's in blue on the screen over here on the PowerPoint. So all of these things that the city of Moab and its water system, those things are things that city staff is basically going to draft and we're going to review. And there's certain ones I see us, like we just talked about, having more input on. And more because we're like, wait, we want to understand it in this way. We want to see the metric in this way. And then when we get into our next discussions, down here in these things in orange, those will be things that might come from this meeting, and we are talking, and then Carly or someone else from city staff may help craft it into a document. Because I don't really envision members of this group doing that drafting, unless I'm wrong, Carly. I was thinking it would ultimately be a discussion here leads to you or someone on your staff drafting different sections.
Certainly, if the board wants to pitch it, like if we come up with, there are different like conservation practices that we can flesh out. And if one member of the board or a couple, like a working group, wants to tackle actually developing the policy and the program, I think that's completely appropriate. And it would be actually very helpful. And we value your expertise and critical eye in that. So we can either revamp ones that currently exist in the plan, or create completely new ones. It's completely up to you. But I do think that's where this board is most valuable. You're right. The stuff about like the system profile, the water use, all of those kinds of things, that's staff because it's just data. And of course, and we'll have you review for quality control and making sure that we've kind of thought of everything and you feel like we're achieving the goals that the state needs to accomplish the water conservation plan requirements. But really development of the programming I see as being more of the group projects with the city part of that discussion. But I do want this board to feel like they can kind of take that and run.
But I also think for the sake of a document that's actually readable, someone on city staff needs to make sure that it's.
Yeah, I can help with drafting. Like, if it's someone wants to put something rough together and, Lisa and I polish it. Yeah, I'm not too worried about that, product part. It's more like the details of the policy or the practice that we really value this board's advice on.
So does that kind of answer your question, Mike? Can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, kind of. So the big answer to my question is city staff, maybe starting with Carly as being the top dog in this effort. And she will enlist city staff. I mean, if I look at the, the upper part of this index in here, a lot of it is engineering stuff, not all of it. and she can enlist all those people. And you're right, the water conservation goals are a part that we could largely write. Maybe, well, I don't know, it could be, I've written so much of this kind of stuff over the years. I mean, I'm very comfortable writing any and all of this.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping will happen is as we go through the rest of this discussion, it starts to become apparent that, hey, Jeremy's really excited about some of the things related to conservation practices in landscapes, and Denver's really excited about some things related to some incentives and rebates. I'm making this up, but that way then they might draft some things that we talk about as a group, and then it might go to Carly to then get formed into a way that the whole document flows.
Yeah.
Okay, all that's fine, Carl. What I'm trying to emphasize here is what I'm afraid of is that without a clear defined path how a finished document is going to appear by magic out of a word processor someplace.
And that's what we're trying to do today, is start to make those assignments. Because if we can move through the rest of this presentation and go through some of the topics, I think that will start to become more apparent. That was my hope.
Yeah, the formatting and everything like that, that's easy to work out. It'll be city staff putting it all together. The board doesn't have to do that, but just like the work product, the content is where I see the work going. And then I can figure it out otherwise.
And the idea was to go through this, Mike, and go, all right, what are the different topics we want to discuss as a board? And then start to set some dates and deadlines so that if, for instance, we're talking about different green infrastructure options, and Jeremy has agreed to write some of that section and bring things together for us, he knows, okay, I need to have that together by the November meeting. And then we have the November meeting dedicated to talking about it as a group, so that we're like, okay, here's what we want it to say. And then he can work on it some more with city staff. But unless we get to a place where we're actually starting to go, okay, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, it's still very amorphous. But I'm hoping that by the end of this meeting, if we can, in the next 40 minutes, start to identify some of those things if we can move past this slide. Does that work for folks?
Okay.
Are there other topics or questions you guys have as far as these first ones with, yes, Denver, thank you.
I have been thinking that Chuck and Eric and Levi and Carly and the city council can do the most incredible job in the world on Moab city water. But the thing we're thinking about really is the Glen Canyon aquifer. And the other shoe that could drop has to do with the email that Mike sent out this morning, saying that very soon or within the year, we may have to present incontrovertible evidence that the Glen Canyon aquifer will be harmed, or else the group in San Juan County will be able to get through their 5,000 acre foot request. And I was thinking, if you just got almost silly for a minute, suppose we considered all the wells and springs in Moab as one leaky faucet, okay? And it leaks 2,200 acre feet a year. If we turned it off, if we just really got abstract for a minute, so we turn off all the water in Moab, if they turned on a 5,000 acre leaky faucet just across the border in San Juan, that 2,000 acre feet a year that we put back in the aquifer would more than twice that amount would be taken out. Is there anywhere in here that we could move toward getting a regional approach to this, or somehow to realize that this adversarial approach toward the water in the Glen Canyon aquifer is, it isn't all or nothing. It isn't either they get 500 acre feet and their development fails, excuse me, or they get 5,000 acre feet, which is twice the amount of water that Moab uses right now. Maybe this is just all blue sky stuff, but it just seems like we're getting very particular, and there's a very clear threat that would kind of annihilate all this good work.
I think what you're raising, and maybe maybe some of that belongs in the environmental concerns section of this first bit. Feel free to jump in if you think I'm off base here, but as you were talking, it made me realize, we are not in a position where the city or even Grand County has control over its own aquifer, that it extends in a larger area than we control. And so I think that's something that could be put into that section of it, which then will help it be something that we also then try to address in our water conservation goals. So if we've got, because we can't, you're right, we can't just go, okay, we're doing our thing in Moab City, but all this other stuff could mean that all that's for naught. Because I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, and I'm just wondering if some of the smart people on the board, like that have been going through this for years and years and years, have got any idea about how we could sort of be more effective in actually approaching it as the aquifer and not the city limits.
Well, yeah, and so what I would recommend is, like, not to get too far down this road, but this could be a recommendation in the conservation goals, right? Where we want to conserve the aquifer, and you could say a recommendation is a regional body that governs the use of the aquifer. That's a recommendation that this board has, and it's part of our conservation plan. And the recommendation can be detailed, like who should be the members, and you can say like what their timeline and their focus and what those recommendations should be. So I think it's totally appropriate to make this one of the goals you flesh out for this conservation plan, the development of such a regional governing body.
And I think that like, especially if we can include reference to this in our description of our water system, which includes the source, which is the aquifer, that it has boundaries bigger than us, then yeah, I think it's a natural to add. So basically we've just identified a topic to add to our conservation, to this section, to our conservation practices, which is that we need to have more discussion and more, you know, like basically this is a political, we need a political solution to this because it's crossing administrative boundaries.
And you're identifying a vulnerability that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
And that is missing, I think, in this current document. So what I see here is that the city staff should be adding some to the beginning of the document in terms of describing it. And then we as a board should make sure this is a topic at one of our meetings where we really get into, all right, what does this want to look like? Is it, you know, is there this idea of a regional body that governs this, something we really want to be pushing? What else do we need to be doing to protect that? And so I think that's an addition I'll make sure we note in the next draft of this, because I'm thinking what should come out of this meeting is, for the next meeting, we'll basically have this section here, the water conservation goals, with an outline for it, so that then we can go, okay, here's what we're going to talk about at different meetings. And I capture that somewhat, Denver?
Yes, that sounds good. I was just wondering if anybody that knows the history of all this is the animosity just so great and so longstanding and so bitter between Santa Monica County and us? Is it feasible to try this?
I don't know that we need to worry about it being feasible yet. I think we need to say this is important and we need to figure out how to do it.
Kari, if I may, let me interject an alternative idea.
And then Eric, you'll be next.
If I may, the subject that Denver is talking about, which is really a regional aquifer problem.
Correct.
That's what the groundwater management plan process is going to be all about. When I look at the city of Moab and its water system and the first subheadings under there, history, government, and population, all right, that's background stuff. The very next subject that really ought to be discussed, in my mind, is what Denver is alluding to: regional groundwater supplies. Okay. And we don't have to be nasty. We don't have to be a nasty about. We don't have to accuse anybody of anything, but we can discuss the various regional uses from different demands and so forth, and why that impacts exactly what the city what the city's is facing.
And that's why what I said a moment ago was, if it gets added into the water source description, and it also gets added in environmental concerns, then that puts it into the document in a way that then we definitely, I think, can rationally and defendably include it also in our water conservation goals with some action items that could include whatever else, because we might come up with other ideas than just this advisory. There might be other things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
And Eric, you had something? Sorry, and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah, so Mike is right. As far as my understanding of the groundwater management plan goal is that there will be limits on the amount of water that can be used by the different entities to make sure that we stay within safe yield. And as far as what I've heard from Mark Stilson, it sounds like there will be some sort of mechanism to measure and monitor these things. And then if it starts to become excessive on the part of one agency or municipality, then there'll be some mechanism to force some sort of conformance to the goals of the groundwater management plan. And that there will be some sort of regional arrangement to make everyone accountable.
Right.
Now, in regard to the aquifer, Ken Colm is working on phase 3 of his work for us, which involves like the spring and well protection areas. So the last discussion that we had on what he's looking at and where he's headed looks like it's going to expand the protection zone significantly up Mill Creek Canyon and towards the east as well. So that will then be something that's part of an ordinance or something wherever this part of state code or whatever that arrangement is for spring and well protection areas based on the work that he's doing. So perhaps that should be included in the discussion of the conservation goal.
So Eric, well, let me ask you guys as a group, the subtopic environmental concerns, would water quality source protection zones fit under that? What do you guys mean by environmental concerns in this context?
Well, whatever we had written in the last plan, but I think that that's exactly what we should be determining in this revision is what do we want to include in there. So what I'm going to do for the next meeting is take the notes from today and redo, like basically do us a true outline and then highlight those things that we've set our priority items and also those things that we're adding in there so that we can then massage it down. Because I think if we don't keep moving a little bit and make sure someone else had something to say as well, we're going to eddy out in here and then not get to a place where we can really move forward. So I think, Denver, did you have something else to add on this?
No, I think that's a good start. Thank you, everybody.
I heard
so Denver's concerns are pretty much already addressed in a lot of ways, and that was the whole effort that the city put in and Living Rivers did when they protested San Juan County's ability to transfer the water rights. So that whole process is started back in 2012 and it's ongoing and will hopefully be concluded with the groundwater management plan.
And I think the groundwater management plan needs to also be referenced in this document because when this document was written in 2016, the groundwater management plan hadn't started yet. So I think that's another piece that's going to be fit into here that will talk to that regional concept.
Thank you.
So we can either keep picking apart this page here or move into some of the more specifics. Jeremy, you haven't said much yet. Anything you want to add?
No, not at this point. I'd like to dive into seeing what's in the packet.
Okay, so here's what we had so far, because there's a pretty, and I didn't take out the list that we have in the current plan. I don't know that we want to necessarily dive into that too much, but I think we should be identifying what conservation measures are in place now and what do we need to develop further and how do we work with staff on it. I guess it would be helpful for me in moving forward with fleshing out this section of the outline for us to move on as we move forward. What are things you guys feel is missing? I know, for instance, Arnie brought up some things about pressurizing the Moab irrigation company system. I know we've talked about green infrastructure. Like, what are the things? And then we also now have talked about the idea of the groundwater management plan and some kind of regional body that helps deal with the fact that this aquifer, we don't have control over most of our water. what else is missing as far as from your perspective, or what else do we want to have as a conservation measure in this plan that we explore further? Anything?
Well, Cara, one way to subdivide this is what's going to be required and what is guidelines. Or in other words, ordinance, for example, would be a species of something that's required, so to speak. In other words, if there was an ordinance saying thou shalt not water their lawn more than an hour a day kind of thing, that'd be an ordinance sort of thing. And it becomes a bigger deal from council's point of view because nobody likes to be told what to do. If, on the other hand, there are guidelines that are widely publicized and educational kind of thing, it says, we encourage you not to water your lawn more than an hour a day because of these sorts of benefits. That's a whole nother bailiwick. So I would encourage you to make it clear when you're discussing conservation measures about what sort of carrot and what sort of stick you're
Right.
contemplating here.
Okay, so I'll include in these notes that we want to have guidelines versus requirements or ordinances. Maybe it'll be easier if we move on to the next. So what we'd looked at in the past, and some of this came from some DNR resources things, we have some different things with the water conservation plan. We also have some things that we could do to the physical system that would conserve water. And this is things like Arnie had, and I don't know, Arnie, if you want to talk for a moment about the idea of more accessibility to secondary water for irrigation, but that might be something that we would include in here in the physical system section. And I'm going to bounce around this real quick so that we can have some idea, because there's not very many slides left here. Then we've got some things about education, public awareness. What are those? That might be more of your guidelines versus your ordinances. Then we have different services that we might want to be thinking about. How do we get people to want to, this is again would work into guidelines versus ordinances. Then, and the same with this, education and training. Then when we get into water pricing or rebates and incentives, these are different, kind of conservation measures that might be more carrots and sticks as far as water pricing. And then we get into ordinances and standards. So that's kind of the framework we had been working on already of what we might be considering. But what I was trying to get with back here on this was, instead of diving into exactly those things right now, what are the general topics you guys feel like we should be talking about as far as water conservation? What are the things you really feel we should be doing and making sure we're recommending or requiring, whichever?
I think the incentives and rebates and rewards is a real a good opportunity. It presents a lot of opportunity, at least, to actually get some concrete reductions in water use if it's done right. Rosemary seemed to come up with regular good ideas, in that regard, and she was trying to implement a number of them, as far as I remember. We still have a couple of, really brilliant people in town who can be consulted and, talked to, like Rosalind Brain and Andrea, who already thinking in these terms. So perhaps they could be approached as far as how these incentives, rebates, and rewards could be implemented, and we could get a little more specific in the report.
So that might be something where, when we determine where we're fitting this into our discussions, maybe we invite people, some outside people into those discussions. Is I think what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Carl, let me throw out one other idea. I'm kind of offering to do a bunch of work here at this point, but I might be the right guy to do this one. Arnie has been big on this, and among others, I'm on the board of the Moab Irrigation Company. I got started this a few years back because I'm one of the users. And when I got out of the planning commission, I thought, well, what am I going to do with my time now? So I volunteered. So here I sit. But here's the deal. A lot of people are interested in, what we've got here is a private nonprofit company who was given an incredible resource 130 years ago, 1890 or so, to the entire valley's surface water. It's a huge thing. You know, at the time, there was water everywhere. Nobody thought anything about it. 130 years later, it's becoming a very valuable resource. It's become clear to me that it's really not just surface water. In part, it's groundwater, because a lot of the water that arrives in Mill Creek is stuff that comes out of the ground as the creek declines down the hill. What I could do here, and I'm not sure if this belongs in the water conservation section or if it belongs in the top half of the report, is kind of describe in general terms of the whole section of how that water, if some of it can be diverted from its present agricultural or pseudo city user resources to be used. I don't want to say that. If some of that water could be used to reduce groundwater, that culinary groundwater that's otherwise used, that would be a great thing. And what all is necessary to make that happen. So I'd be happy to make a stab at writing the overall things. And oh, the other subject is keeping water in the creek through town all the way 24/7. Basically, that'd be the ideal thing. And I'd be happy to try to write that up in an informative document that would introduce people to what's a pretty complicated subject, actually. So I would offer to do that, and I would anticipate that if you're interested in that, it can go, as I say, either in the top half or in the report or the other, and we can all chew on that document. But I would be the champion of that section and write all the draft text, and we can go from there.
And so that might be something, I mean, Arnie, does that start to address some of your concerns or interests in Moab Irrigation Company water availability for secondary use?
It does address my concerns with changing some of the irrigation practices to using secondary water as opposed to using our Glen Canyon Group aquifer if we can use it more efficiently and it's available. But I'm not sure it answers the question that you're asking here, and I'm a little confused with the question you're asking about this slide. I will go ahead and digress for a moment if you don't mind. Obviously, not all of Moab Irrigation Company is suited at this point in time to be pressurized, but that doesn't mean part of it can't be pressurized, and that doesn't mean we can't get some of these people water who aren't getting water, and take some of the, if I could use the word heat, off of the Glen Canyon Group aquifer. So in terms of planning and studies, that would be something that would be in that planning and studies. How can we make better use of secondary irrigation water? Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that that's answering the question that you're asking at this point in time, Cara.
Well, I mean, this can go, all I'm trying to do is get a collection of topics that we want to be talking about as far as conservation measures. So perhaps the thing to do at this point is stop staring at that and stare at each other. Because I think that what happened with the original plan is it was written before we existed. So there's conservation measures that are listed in there, but some of them are things we've never even looked at or considered doing or anything like that. So I guess what I'm really asking each of you, and I'm including Eric and Levi and Carly in this as well, but you know, if each of you had one topic that you really would like to see us dive into as a board to include in this document as a conservation measure. You know, we've got Moab Irrigation Company as a resource that could maybe be better fit into the water supply available to the town. I don't know what else you guys, you know, there's this larger issue of a regional body maybe, or something with the groundwater management plan that helps protect the whole aquifer for everybody. But I know there's other things out there that you guys are interested in. So
it might be useful, instead of trying to do it during a meeting, and we're kind of catching everyone off guard too, like they haven't had time to think about it, which is at the next meeting, take Cara's slide where it says, think of plans, policies, ordinances, best management practices, the whole suite, and come up with like at least 2 ideas that you want to explore in each of those categories. And whether it's, you know, exploring gray water, regional collaboration when it comes to groundwater monitoring and management, exploration of taking advantage of secondary water use, And then we can, as a board, start to react to all of those, and we can sort through them. And you can do straw polls, like maybe no one is interested in incentives and rebates. That's not something that anyone is particularly interested in pursuing. And I'm just trying to, like, we've kind of gone around in circles a bit, talking about sort of really good big ideas, but I feel like we haven't populated the list at all about what we're actually going to be doing. And then once we have that list, we can start attaching like conservation goals to each of those. Like, what do we hope to achieve with something like gray water? What percentage of savings? What percentage of savings or might be accomplished by offsetting, aquifer water with some of the secondary water for Moab irrigation, that kind of thing. But I'm hearing just a ton of good ideas, and I feel like there are many more.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get more from everybody here. And what I'm going to do for the next meeting, I think I have enough to make a better outline of where we want to move forward to, but I really want to make sure we're getting all of the different ideas you guys have had. I mean, we've talked about green infrastructure, we've talked about different things, gray water, that aren't coming out. So like, I want to make sure I'm catching all that, so we can start to assign tasks like Mike just took on a task.
So one thing I think we could bring in is that since we're probably going to have something to say about the groundwater management plan as a board and certainly as the city, one thing I think that we need to have written in there is that there'll be an incentive for the municipality or agency to conserve, and that it's not something like Denver brought up, that all of a sudden whatever one municipality or agency conserves, the others can then suck up and use that. So I think that would be something that should be part of the report, just since I'm on the way out.
It sounds like something like incentives for collaborative management of the aquifer is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
I will look into that. I think it was in the 2016 water report. Mark Stilson said, you guys need to get together and get a regional water authority. And so I tried it, and he recommended that we look at what Nevada had done. And I kind of looked at that a little bit on the internet to the best I can. I'm probably biting off way more than I can chew here. But there was a woman in Nevada who's some sort of a genius organizer. And basically what she convinced the state was, I read, Las Vegas gets all the water. And so they actually have a regional water thing, but it sort of favors the big city. So if it would help, I can look on the internet and see what I can find that other people have done that have created regional water sources, and see if it's even feasible. If you can do that, or if you have to go to some higher authority and just actually let the state decide or something like that, if that's reasonable. Or maybe there's somebody here that knows a whole lot more about this than I do, because I'd have to be looking it all up right now, which I don't mind, but I'm not holding myself out as any kind of expert.
I bet Carly has some ideas, and maybe you guys could work together on that.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to, I think I know you're talking about, she operated the Southern Nevada Water Conservancy District, and she's very effective.
Elroy.
Yeah, that's right. She was effective and highly controversial, brilliant, and also got all the water for Las Vegas out of Nevada, the driest state. So when it comes to, this is something that we can put in the plan and include in the plan. It absolutely can be. Fleshing out the full idea for a regional water authority. One, I don't know of one in Utah. They're called water conservancy districts generally, more like that. And there are a lot of ways to explore doing it. Maybe we have a meeting specifically on that. What's difficult is it's not just up to us. And the state certainly might have to get involved, and there are a lot of questions about water rights and management and those kinds of things. So it's also, I would say, I don't know that we have much, it's something the council would have to undertake, not this body. So I would we might want to explore their appetite for undertaking. That would be a huge endeavor. It would be years long to hammer it out. Certainly something the council can do or try to do. But I don't want it to embroil this body so much. It also doesn't, while it secures a water supply, it does not conserve one necessarily. It doesn't help with our demand management at all, which is the focus of this group. So I think it should be a consideration and can be a recommendation that we explore better regional opportunities to manage groundwater. And maybe that's enough of a statement. And then punt it to the council to pursue it fully. But
sounds good. I mean, I'll just wait then and see what happens. I guess I don't know. I don't really have an assignment yet. I'll just.
I think it'll come up. So I think for the next meeting, we're going to have from the city staff some draft information that will help us with better understanding of water use trends, current per capita use, et cetera, demand projections, environmental concerns, including some of the stuff we're going to add in about the aquifer and the outside things. So I think the homework you guys all have is what Carly was talking about earlier, which is what are some of the things that we should make sure we're including in this document from your perspective, you know, whether it's securing funding so that Levi can fix leaky pipes, or it's, you know, so it can be as that's a big endeavor, but it's also mundane in the sense of, okay, that's like a 2-line sentence. It's not a big long discussion to have. And then but also maybe it includes things like how do we incorporate more gray water in different areas? How do we incorporate green infrastructure in different areas? Where is that appropriate? How do we do the secondary water things? What else though are we missing? Like, I think the biggest thing is making sure before the next meeting, we've all really thought about what's missing. That's a really creative idea that we should be talking about as a group. And we might end up coming up with only 3 or 4 things that we really need to dive into in depth. Because some of it might be as simple as, you know what, if Levi could just fix those leaky pipes or those pipes that we're worried are going to explode because they're so old, you know, maybe that is one of the single biggest things we can do. I don't know the answer to that. I think that's something that we need from, you know, all of us talking about it, and then from people like Carly, Levi, and Chuck. And sorry you're not going to be here, Eric. Maybe you're pleased. But does that seem like a good next step? Are there things you guys feel like we're missing on this? So much silence.
Mark can definitely get you the numbers that you need. He's already kind of getting a handle on everything.
Right.
We can have that available for the next meeting, like just at least a path forward for getting you water trend and demand projection data.
I think that'll give us some more tangible stuff to bite into, which I think is part of what's missing.
Isn't a lot of this sort of plug and play? And I'm sure that the engineering department has thought through this for years. And so I don't want to say, well, gee whiz, it'd be a good idea to fix those leaky pipes so we can put out a fire, because Chuck is going to say, for heaven's sake, Deborah, what do you think we do all day long here? Okay, so would it be possible for us to kind of know from Carly or Chuck what's just a number they need to put in and we don't have to worry about because they're already taking care of it?
Well, and I think part of that, Denver, and I think Levi, please chime in if you'd like, but I think a piece of that is based on what's happened with our water rates and the fact that they've been so low. There's been no money for years to do infrastructure improvements to replace things that, I mean, some of our pipes are literally what, 75, 80 years old? And some of our main pipes in downtown Moab are. So that's, I mean, I think that that's something we probably have underestimated the real risk that gives to the system and the potential for huge losses of water and water accessibility for customers, you know. So I think having a really clear understanding of those things is really important. And some of this might be literally that simple of like Levi, you know, and maybe it also becomes a tool Levi, you and Chuck can use to help moving forward, because I know budgets are all a mess right now, but then there's something to say, hey, this is one of the things we need to do actually for water conservation. is make sure our system is not going to just explode on us.
If there's something that we could help with, I know that when Chuck had his slide that brought up memories of working for the federal government, is that you have a want list and there's a cut line, and you prioritize your want list, and then you get everything to a certain point, and that's it, and you don't get anything below the line. We just need to make really sure that we are in concert with the city staff, the engineers particularly, and what they really want, so we can help to the extent that we have any weight to throw around, that we can put a little weight behind what they're saying is really, really necessary.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there, Carl.
Okay, so hopefully at the next meeting, then we can have a little more information about the demand, about the, you know, and maybe, I mean, I think with the work you, Levi, and Chuck have done to get stuff for, I mean, I've seen different tables Chuck's put together to really make it clear that you know, there are some real weak links in our system, and making sure that that's really well explained. And then looking at that from a conservation perspective, as well as just from a health and safety perspective for the city. Does that seem like a good place to, so we have a few minutes left. Does anybody have something that they really just are like, why was this not on the agenda? I really want to talk about it.
Well, just to add to what you were saying, maybe just for the notes for now, that idea of distinguishing or breaking down the term conservation into the category of conservation derived from existing infrastructure and how we can improve the current system, to conservation that focuses more on, you know, new initiatives or incentivizing new kinds of infrastructure, I think would be a good focus for how we prioritize what we're going to be, you know, emphasizing in this document. Because maybe we just focus on, like we're saying, fixing the pipes so we don't have leaks, which cause issues that would far outweigh the amount of water we could, you know, save by passive and active water harvesting. I don't know, I'm just making that up, but yeah. And also I think it's something that maybe we can get more people on board with, whereas conservation sometimes can be a controversial term, but if conservation is poised in terms of, you know, maintaining our fundamental infrastructure, then that's a useful point of origin.
Okay.
Jeremy, I like the way you put that. I can see us offering incentives for buildings that are already existing. And I can see us suggesting new building ordinances that would not be too difficult to implement at this point in time, although they are controversial. So the point being that the difference between incentives and perhaps ordinances might boil down to whether or not it's a new building or an old building. It's tough to retrofit these older homes, and I don't think it's necessarily a burden you want to put on somebody. However, with new homes, and that's where kind of you're ahead of this, is that, okay, we've got old infrastructure out there and new infrastructure, and ordinances on new infrastructure are much more palatable than ordinances on old infrastructure, that's for sure. And perhaps we do go the route where, okay, we incentivize water conservation with our older homes, and we propose ordinances for the new developments, which is where they were going with their new rules for the overnight accommodations. And it all makes sense. That makes sense, and it's kind of where's the low hanging fruit as opposed to the tougher stuff to get done. I like the way you split that apart, Jeremy.
Yeah, can I impose on you, Jeremy, to take 5 or 10 minutes and
Sure.
shoot me an email with like what, because I took notes, but you said it better.
Okay. Yeah.
And that
usually
way,
I say things and then they disappear, but I will write this one down.
because what I'd really like to do in preparation for the next meeting is have a different set of things we're looking at. So we're actually looking at, you know, the beginnings of a new document, and then we can be starting to fill out and go, okay, wait, do we already have these things? And then we can, I think as we get into more tangible conversations about all this stuff, more will flow.
Yeah, I'll draft something. I'll send it your way long before the next meeting, probably in the next hour.
That'd be
I'd like to,
fabulous. Yeah.
I'd like to really reinforce what Jeremy said, because I've got some neighbors that are pretty far to the right, and you just say the word conservation and they get emotional. And
Right.
telling somebody that if you'll do something so your house won't burn down, I know this is going to sound really simple-minded, but that's going to go so much farther with some of my friends and neighbors than saying, how'd you like to be a real green conservationist?
Well, and that also speaks to, I'm on the Grand Conservation District, and the conservation districts came about as farmers and ranchers working to conserve soil. And a lot of farmers and ranchers consider themselves hardcore conservationists, but they get very upset when they see certain more left-leaning perspectives thrown into it. So I think that there's a way we can write this document that can be inclusive of all.
If you're done, I have one other thing to mention before we get done. I've forgotten board reports.
Okay.
We have a new person in water resources named Jessica Pearson that they've hired. She attended the last MOP meeting, and I was kind of excited because the people I was dealing with 5 or 6 years ago had been there 20 years, and I asked them about the 2003 water resource report. Maybe we ought to reconsider it. And the guy said, well, what's changed?
Oh, nothing, not much.
Nothing. Either way, she's actually been hired as an ARC info person, but she does have ties to the Moab area. She's worked a couple seasons with Katie and the wildlife resources people and some other institutions down here, and does have a history with water use and water conservation, getting her master's up in, not in Klamath, but the next water basin down. And she's actually been assigned to the Southeast Utah area. How much time she'll actually have to spend down here will be interesting, but there's a possibility we might actually have a little more attention from water resources this in the next couple of years.
Cool. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Arnie, for that.
Hey, so before we go, I think we should congratulate Levi on becoming a public works director. He's worked his way up through the whole thing, and he's more than qualified. It's great to see someone who's local and who, you know, was just a regular worker down there for so many years. He's seen a bunch of public works directors, certainly the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we should wish him well and have confidence in where we're headed.
About time, Levi.
That's exciting. Good news. Thank you.
Congratulations, Levi. Good luck.
Thank you all very much. Very unexpected, Eric. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And definitely, Levi, please make sure, you know, if there's things we can do to be helpful in any way, let us know, because I think that the need for maintenance and repair of our systems is severely underestimated by a lot of people. And if this group can help with some of that, I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, thank you for your support, and same to this board. Anything I can do to help.
Okay, what else we got? Anything? Well, thank you guys. We will meet again, I guess, in this format. And I will do a little work with Carly. And if you have things you'd like me to include in the next iteration of this draft outline that we talk about, so that we can get some really defined assignments for everybody, please let me know that between now and the week before the next meeting, so that we can get that in there for the next packet. Okay, thanks. Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.